I want to talk a bit more about the demographic numbers in France. About a year ago, I did a video talking about the demographic numbers in in France and Britain. The reason I want to talk about France is because there are other numbers that seem to confirm the pretty dire situation that I was talking about. Basically, that it's only going to be a few more years before France goes past the 50% mark for non-European births in France. Basically, African and Muslim births in France going beyond the 50% mark. Now, what I want to do, if I show you this, now that was the graphic that I refer people to in the video that I did a year ago. That graphic shows testing the percentage of babies in France who are tested for sickle cell anemia. Now, sickle cell anemia, that's a pretty good indication of non-French, non-European births in France, because you have to have at least one parent born in Africa. And historically, most African immigration to France has come from Africa, and most Muslim immigration to France has come from Africa. So it's a reasonably good guide. And what you see there is in 2015, 73.4% of Ile-de-Paris, that's the county of Paris, those 73.4% of births were tested for sickle cell anemia. And you see down on near Marseille, it was a bit over 52%. But there is other data that I think confirms that, and that's what I want to talk about here. Now, what's getting talked about is a study that was produced by an organisation called France Strategy, basically analysing data in France. And it's getting, that is the France Strategy report. You can see it there, France Strategy, What is Segregation? It's not so much talking about the overall demographic situation. What it's saying is there is no integration. Muslim and African populations are self-segregating within the major cities. What a shame it is. That's basically what they're saying. Now, this got a lot of, it attracted quite a lot of attention, particularly through this guy. If you see him, that's Eric Zemmour. I quite like him, but what I find is when you dig into detail what he's saying, he doesn't actually say very much. He's quite good at attracting attention. I find him actually a little bit flashy. He'll use buzzwords like the Great Replacement in order to be considered a bad boy. But really what he's doing is repeating the message, or here what he was doing is repeating the message from France Strategy, saying that there is no integration, there is only segregation. Well, the authorities can quickly back that away and say, well, of course, that's no problem. Birds of a feather will flock together. We just have to have a few more, a little less racism, a bit more spending, and a few more training programs, and then we'll quickly deal with this program of sensitive urban zones, which is what the French call their ghettos. So I want to talk about this study a little bit, though. The best summary I've found for it is in this this publication, Observatoire d'immigration et de la démographie. Right, so the observation of immigration and demography. Now they gave a summary, and what they basically say is, they've looked at all the major urban districts, and what they're saying is immigrant children or children born to non-European immigrant parents were in the majority among the 0 to 18-year-olds in more than half of the municipalities of Seine-Saint-Denis. That's one ghetto area of Paris. That's one area, a district of Paris. And this proportion is particularly marked in neighbourhoods up to 84% in Clichy-sous-Bois. Okay, again, they're clustering together. And they're saying it's not only for Ile-de-France or Paris, also it's in Rennes and in Limoges. And then the increase in the proportion of children with an immigrant background is, however, very unevenly distributed in the urban units analysed, which testifies to a certain archipelago. And now that is a nice euphemism. That means ghettoisation. So that study attracted quite a lot of attention on the blogosphere, but what I want to look at is two other things. Well, that France Strategy study didn't deal with overall demographics. That's what I want to look at here by looking firstly at sickle cell anemia testing, and secondly looking at births to foreign parents within France, or French government data on births to foreign parents in France. Now, I want to talk a little bit about those the sickle cell anemia testing. There's a study here by a fellow called Bernard Ivar, Contemporary Demographic Changes of Urban Units in France, blah-de-blah-de. Now, he talks about sickle cell testing here, I think, and yes. Now, what I want... what he's saying here is why sickle cell testing is a reasonably accurate measure of foreign African and Muslim births in France. I actually think it underestimates the numbers because it doesn't take into account Indian, Pakistani, Afghan, or I think even Iraqi or Syrian immigration post the migrant crisis of 2015. So. But I'll read what he says. I think this deals a little bit with methodology. Does the number of neonatal tests for sickle cell disease performed in France account for the vigorous dynamism of non-European origin births outside? Vigorous dynamism, eh? The answer is debated because the parameter used accounts for tests carried out on people at risk from Greece. So some people in Greece and in southern Italy and Sicily, they will get... tested, and the West Indies, which are all areas belonging to the European Union. Okay. In addition, in some health facilities, because they were sometimes unable to define precisely those at risk, all births were subject to the test in question. However, what he says is, nevertheless, we can consider that despite this reservation, the indicator constitutes a proxy variable for non-European births in France, and to refer to it with caution to reflect a trend towards demographic change in a given territory. The margin of error is probably well below 10% in view of the weight of European populations tested and taken into account unduly. Now, just in case you think this guy is some kind of hardliner, I want to go down to his conclusions, which are pathetic, just usual. Probably, my guess is this guy, I don't know, my guess is he may be a retired academic who is now enjoying spending his time talking about things that were unmentionable whilst he was working as a full-time academic. And his conclusions are that today, like many Western countries, the country is faced with a major structural problem of lack of productive job creation, particularly in industry, which is leading more and more young graduates to economic expatriation. Yeah, French people, not the migrant invaders, not people from Africa or Muslim countries. They're living high on the hog on the welfare system. And this phenomena is bound to increase and may lead to a change in the country's migratory status. No, it won't. GDP per head in France is, I think, about 20 or 30 times what it is in Pakistan or Afghanistan. I think nearly 100 times what it is in Somalia. So no way. No, it doesn't matter how big the recession. Migrants are not going to stop wanting to come from those countries to France. Okay, and so he's saying there's a problem of an unskilled labour force. At least he is joining the dots, which again people will not do. People will not talk about these things in conjunction. The economic problems in conjunction with the demographic mass immigration problems. And what he's saying is, well, these problems he says, unless there is a reduction of its overall abundant unskilled labour force, the country has no chance of avoiding the deepening of its current economic decline. No, it has no choice of avoiding economic breakdown, collapse, which is at the moment only being plugged by borrowing and lending money into the economy. To achieve this, and this is his solution, a renewed training system will have to contribute to the emergence of a new human capital. No, it won't. And the public authorities will have to set up a plan to help a significant proportion of low-skilled immigrant workers, especially illegal migrants, like they're going to come forward, to return to their country of origin. Now, no Western country can begin to afford to compensate, to tempt people, to pay people to go back to a country like Somalia or Afghanistan, where you earn less in a week than you would, less in a year than you might earn in a week in France. Okay, it's and you have to work for it if you go back to those countries. You can't just sit on the welfare system. So this guy is not a hardliner, but he is saying that the sickle cell testing works. And I want to look in a second at the result, the data for that sickle cell testing. Now if I go to this study, this one here, I don't know if you can see that. Let me just scroll up. This is the International Journal of Neonatal Screening, a cure for insomnia, paralysing stuff, if paralysing stuff was written. Newborn screening for sickle cell disease in Europe. One thing I will always resent politically correct immigration happy politicians for is forcing me to have to spend my time reading this kind of pulp, this kind of garbage, right? I never want to read about newborn screening for sickle cell disease in Europe. Okay, rant over, but I've done it anyway. Now, let's go down to the bit where it talks about France, and let's see if I can find France. There we are, France. Now, if I go down, I don't know if you can see that. What that basically, let me just do this. Okay, what that said was that newborn screening for sickle cell disease in Europe. In the years 2006 to 2016, newborns screened in the targeted programme in metropolitan France. That means the country of France, not just the urban areas. The whole country is called metropolitan France. It means France minus overseas territories. That rose from 27% to 38.9%, basically 39%. That's a 12% increase. So in 2006, 27% of all babies were tested for sickle cell anemia in France, and a decade later, 10 years later, 39% of babies born in France were tested for sickle cell. That was in 2016. Now, that rate of increase is itself increasing. If I go back to the, let me just do this. I'll see if I can find the graphic which I had before. Yeah, that's the one I quoted before. Now, if you can see those numbers. Now, I'll leave a link to all these reports in case you struggle to read them, in case the print's too fine. But what you see here, that the numbers that were tested in France, in the whole of France, for sickle cell, according to this previous graphic, I'm not saying this graphic is right. I'm not referring to it to say that the numbers are right. I am referring to it to say that the increase, that the growth is about right. Now, in 2012, the number was 34.44, 2013, 35.7, 2014, 37.2, 2015, 38.85. So I would say increasing by a bit over 1.5% per year. So if you then go back to this study here, which was basically saying that in 2016, it was 39% of babies were tested for sickle cell. We're 5 years on from that, so 5 times 1.5%, that's 7.5%. What you're looking at there is about between 46 and 47% of babies in France getting tested for sickle cell anemia, basically having at least one parent being from Africa, either African or North African Muslim. Now, I think that, again, I repeat, I think that underestimates the number of foreigners in France, because sickle cell testing in recent years, in the last about decade and a half, I would say, France has started to get Muslim immigration, not just from North Africa, its former colonies, but also from Pakistan, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria. And that will have swelled the number, and those people will not have been tested for sickle cell. So what I want to do now is to look at the French government's data on births to see if that confirms those numbers. Sickle cell numbers, I think, suggest 46 to 47% at least of births are of foreigners born in France. Now, I don't know if you can see this. This is French data on those births. Now, I'll leave a link to this spreadsheet. It's got a lot of data in. Really, if you thought the previous stuff was paralysing, this will kill you. You'll want to slash your wrists after having to look at this. What you've got here, what this shows is births in France from 1998 there down to 2019. And what it shows is 2 parents born to foreigners, and then it shows 2 parents born outside of the EU 28. So I'm not looking at foreign births, I'm simply looking at births outside the EU, basically African and Muslim births, which is what they'll be. Now, two parents born outside the EU, that was 8.1% in 1998, 14.8% in 2019. So let me go over a bit. And then father born in an EU 28 country and the mother born outside the EU 28 in 2000. In 1998, that was 0.2%. 2019, that was 0.2%, and the other way around, with the father born outside the EU and the mother born in the EU 28, that was 0.3%. Again, 0.3%. The more interesting numbers, if we go back further, what you then see is father born outside the EU 28, mother born in France. In 1998, that was 6.1%. In 2019, that was 7%. And the other way around was in 1998, 4.1%. And 2019, it was 5.8%. And where both parents are born outside the EU, in 1998, that was 8.1%. And in 2019 it was 14.8%. Now, if you add up all those numbers, what you get is, I think, about 28% of French babies were born to a couple where at least one parent was born outside of the EU. One or both parents born outside of the EU. And in 1998, it was about 18.9, I think, percent of babies were born to parents, one of whom was born outside of the EU 28. So if you take, say, 28% of, so that's foreign births born in France. Okay, now in 2019, there's those foreign births, but you then have to add the ones who were born in France in 1998 to parents who were, one of whom was born outside of France. Those children, when they have children now today, the children today will count as children who are born to parents, both of whom were born in France. Now, I would roughly guess that at least 50% of those people who were born in 1998 have gone ahead and married each other. So a Muslim kid who's born in 1998, one of its parents was from outside France, it is born in France, marries another one who's born in France and has children. So I would say at least half of them have done that. So half of 19, that's about 9.4%. If you add that to about 28.1% of foreign births or children born to parents who are born outside of France today, that takes you up to about 37%, roughly, maybe a touch more than that, 37.5%. If you then also say that what's called third generation births, the ones who were born to parents who were born in France, who were also born to parents who were born in France, I would say prior to 1998, that number would probably be at least 10%, at least 10%. If it was about 19% in 1998 born to foreign parents, I would say that the numbers from the generation before, I would say, is at least 10%. So again, if you have 37.5% to 10%, you again get to a figure of about 47.5%. I think that ties in with the numbers for sickle cell testing. Roughly 47% of babies born in France are born to non-French, non-European parents, basically Muslim or African parents. Now that ties in with what I was saying in the last video that I did. If you let me just do this, I'll bring up that graphic again. If you recall that is numbers of people tested for sickle cell anemia. I'm not relying on that data here, but it seems to tie in. 2015, 38.85%. and another 6 years on from that, I think that is about 47%. That's the figure for foreign births, Muslim or African births, non-European births within France. I think that is what we are at today, and that is a problem, because I think that means that it's only another couple of years, 2-3 years, I would say, before African and Muslim births in France hit about 50%, going from those figures. And what makes it worse is that those numbers are concentrated in urban areas. So 50% isn't the magic number. The magic number is when those ghettos, those heavily concentrated ghettos where the police won't go, all they can try and do is contain the situation, when they hit a critical mass and say to themselves, we now rule, we can keep the forces of law out of here, and we can establish our own rule. We have the confidence to do that. When that happens, then I think the authority of the state goes down, and then I think the state goes down. Currently, they're in effectively sealed ghettos, which in kind of rings, donuts that surround the centre of the town. If you go on holiday to a European capital, go to the centre of town where you have your gelato stores and the stores selling crocodile skin handbags and stilettos, and just walk out in any direction. After half an hour, you're going to hit some Islamic or African ghetto. Pretty much any direction you go, and it won't take you that long. Particularly in Paris, you do it in Paris, it gets kind of scary. Well, you need strong nerves to do that. It's pretty unpleasant. Now, when they get the confidence to say, right, we rule here, then that is when the state will start to go down. And no one is talking about this. No one is running these numbers. No one is analysing these data. The most that's happening is you're getting that France strategy study where talking heads can get up and say, look, integration isn't working. There is segregation. Ain't it awful? No, they're not running these numbers about overall demographics. No one is talking about it. And in part, they can carry on not talking about it, because as long as the numbers are simply about babies don't, they're not heavy hitters. They don't have a big impact upon, you don't feel them in society when you're walking around the streets. When they hit 18 or 20, then you do, because then they become youths, and then they start making trouble. They will demand power. So currently, if I go back to if I go back to talking about exponential numbers, France is right on the corner of an exponential curve. Exponential curves, they go along, they're very flat at the bottom, and then suddenly they go up very fast. And we are at the bottom of an exponential curve like that. Now, I want to talk about exponential curves. If I can, let me just do this. Hold on, bear with me. Now, if you can see that is an exponential curve. You see it's very low, and then suddenly it goes up. If that was a normal number curve, say 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2, it would look like it was increasing fast at the beginning, but its rate of growth would be slow. If it was 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5, you'd get a gradual curve, but it would look a lot higher at the beginning, but it would never go vertical like the exponential curve. Exponential curves go vertical. I want to show you this one. I took that curve from this blog, Understanding Exponential Growth, the Mathematics of Pandemics. Now, that's about COVID. But what it says about the exponential curve is the curve almost seems flat at first, but then steeper and steeper and steeper and steeper, exclamation mark. So it's suddenly it just it seems to explode. You don't notice it. Everyone says, as people are saying with mass immigration, oh, the numbers are tiny, they're below 10%. So what if it doubles? So what if it trebles? It'll never be a majority. We'll always have the upper hand. It'll always be, this country will always be essentially English or essentially French. The numbers are low, or the numbers are getting higher, and then suddenly you turn the corner, and then it goes vertical fast, and then it takes over. And that is what people also say is, well, of course, these exponential curves, they always trail off eventually. And what people will say is if you have a piece of cheese in your fridge and it goes mouldy, the increase in the growth of the mould, at one stage it'll look like that mould is going to overtake the known universe, but then it doesn't, because the mould runs out of cheese to feed on, and then the mould dies off. So there is a limiting factor. The limiting factor is when your country, France or Britain, becomes more poverty-stricken, more squalid than Afghanistan, than Somalia, than the backwaters of Morocco or Pakistan, and that is a long way. That is a long way to go. So that exponential curve, in immigration terms, is not going to flatten out for a long time yet, and people don't understand. The politicians know that people don't understand exponential growth. I would say that France is right before the corner, just about there, before the corner of that exponential curve, before it really starts to go vertical. Yeah, a lot of babies getting born. You don't notice baby. If you're a maternity nurse, you notice those babies getting born. If you're just walking around the streets, you don't, because babies generally they're not walking around the streets. In 20 years' time, they will be. Okay, now people don't understand exponential growth. I think Einstein said it was the main thing that people just don't understand in science was exponential growth or compound interest, and he said it was the most powerful force in the universe. Just to explain what it means, there's a riddle, fittingly a French riddle, exponential growth. A lily pond, so goes the French riddle, starts with a single lily leaf. Each day the number of leaves will double. 2 leaves on the second day, 4 leaves on the third day, 8 leaves on the fourth day, etc. If the pond is full on the 30th day, on which day is the pond half full? Now people will normally say, well, on the 15th day, but that's not the case. If it's doubling and it reaches, if it covers the whole of the pool on the 30th day, well, half of that will be the day before, on the 29th day. And that French story, what it talks about is you have a groundsman who's working in a chateau for an aristocrat, and there's a nice lake in the grounds, and one day he sees a lily pad, next day he sees 2, and the next day he sees 4, and he thinks, how lovely lilies, the frogs can hop from one pad to the other. I've always liked lilies and lotus flowers. And then it's 16, then it's 32, 64, 128, and he thinks, actually these are growing quite fast, I might have to do something about this. It'll take me a week to get rid of them, but I'll have plenty of time because there's hardly any of them. It's a huge great lake, and I'll do something about it when the lake is half full of lily pads. Then it'll be too much, and I'll spend a week chopping them back. And then he notices it growing and growing and growing, and then by the time the lake is half full of lily leaves, it's too late. Next day the whole lake is full of lily leaves. They kill off everything else, and the lake is dead. And that is what happens with exponential growth. That is what people don't understand. When it hits fast, it hits hard, and that is what is likely to happen with mass immigration, particularly in a country like France. Now, at that point where that immigration curve gets steep, I think simultaneously that will be combined with something else, making it even worse, which is the economy crashing, because as that man, that Yves Bernard fella was saying, that mass immigration is creating a large pool of unskilled labour that the economy can't support, which is a burden on the economy. That's creating more and more economic problems. When it gets too big, that will contribute to economic breakdown, which I think is already happening. The gap is being plugged by printing money and lending it into the economy. And then if you get mass immigration going vertical, or the demographics going vertical, if at the same time you get the economy crashing, then the authority of the state will break down. I think that's what we fear. We think that collapse will mean we have lost. Everything is gone. No, I think that's the point at which we have won, where there is everything to gain, because at that point, the corrupt, coercive, bullying state, that has gone down. Ordinary people will want to provide law. It's a basic human need that you have to have met in order to be able to live together and to trade. And people will do it for themselves. They will provide law themselves together for themselves. And no sensible English or French person will join a legal system that allows foreign invaders into that system. Why would they? Poverty, crime, ill will, degradation, general sort of hostility and lack of creative economic potential. That means there's no incentive for no right-thinking English or French person is going to allow that, and the populations, I think, will separate out hard and permanently, and then the conditions in those foreign enclaves will plummet to zero, without any services, without any welfare, no gas, no phone, no electricity, no water, no drainage. You will get poverty and squalor and sickness pervading within those foreign ghettos, and at that point those foreign populations will leave of their own free will. They will be amenable to a free aeroplane ticket home. And the key thing to this is to find ways for us to maintain law for ourselves when the state goes down. I keep saying it, that's the important thing. Enoch Powell, more than 50 years ago, he famously foresaw the River Tiber foaming with much blood. If we can maintain law by ourselves, for ourselves, once the corrupt state, the coercive state, has collapsed itself, then I think we can accomplish wide-scale, very wide-scale repatriation without Enoch Powell's forebodings coming to reality.